What have you put in place to maintain your fandom for both movies and wrestling so they don't just become part of your work for comicbook.com and you're still a fan?
Hey guys, this is Tempest from Wrestle Talk, and I'm reminding you to support Tom Talks Rubbish.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Fresh, and today I'm back with another interview. This time, I'm joined by Liam Crowley from comicbook.com. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tom. I'm glad we could make this happen. I know we've had some scheduling conflicts, but here we are.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you, man. So if we take this back to the beginning, what comes first? Your passion for wrestling or your passion for movies? As I know that's what you cover primarily for your work.
Sure. Movies definitely comes first, but they're a lot closer than you would think. My passion for movies began with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as you can kind of tell by all this paraphernalia behind me. I do have some wrestling stuff, AJ Styles versus John Cena, SummerSlam 2016. But I really fell in love with the MCU in summer 2011. That's when the first Thor and the first Captain America movies came out. And I got obsessed with this idea of like, oh my God, they're building to this Avengers movie. It's going to be so cool. A couple months later, October 2011 is when I first discovered wrestling. So they actually kind of came very close together. It was an episode of Monday Night Raw. I was flipping through the channels. I was trying to find the World Series because I was a massive baseball fan at the time. Still am to this day, but not nearly as close as I am with movies and wrestling. And it was the episode where Triple H was in charge and the roster had just walked out.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I was watching it this time.
Yeah, right. I see this guy in a suit addressing a basketball arena full of people. And I'm like, why have I never heard of this before? There are 15,000 people packed in to this show, and there's not even any wrestlers scheduled to be on. And then I think it was Sheamus hit the ring, Cena hit the ring, CM Punk hit the ring. And these larger than life characters like immediately hit me. And then from there, I legitimately never missed another week of WWE television. I watched Raw every Monday, SmackDown most Fridays. I was introduced to TNA around summer 2012. AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, Kazarian, Samoa Joe, Kurt Angle, Sting, all that stuff. I fell in love with the British Indies around 2014, 2015, Progress, ICW, Rev Pro, stuff like that. And then AEW came in 2019, and it's just been a boom ever since.
So with you discovering wrestling, does your sort of movie consumption maybe take a hit?
It depends. It really depends. As of
in 2011, I mean, like when
in
you first discover it.
Okay. I would say no. I think I still balanced it pretty well. I'm still fairly young. I'm 22 years old. So in 2011, I was 11 years old. So I was very much consuming content like a child would, in the sense of I would go to school, and then when I came home, it was wrestling and TV and playing sports and, just kind of living the carefree life, which was very fun. But no, when I was young, I very much, I don't want to say it was 50-50, but there was ample time divided between wrestling and movies. But at the same time, this is 2011 with wrestling, when really the only show you're watching weekly is Raw. Nowadays, it's a lot more difficult to balance because you got Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW, anything with New Japan, Rampage, etc. So it's gotten a little bit more difficult to balance now than it was back in the day.
What have you put in place in that case, since you talked about it being a bit of a balancing act? What have you put in place to maintain your fandom for both movies and wrestling so they don't just become part of your work for comicbook.com and you're still a fan?
That's a really good question, because I do struggle with it quite a bit. Because there are times where you just feel like burnt out, right? You feel like you're consuming content, not necessarily because you want to, but because you have to. And so I have done my best to, when it comes to having purely leisure time, time when I don't have to worry about writing or podcasting or making videos, I try to dedicate that time towards other activities I like to do for fun that have nothing to do with work. Stuff like going to the gym, stuff like listening to music,
Preach.
stuff like stuff like spending time with the family. Because it allows me to make sure that that time I spend with movies and wrestling is still special. Because if I'm spending all my time with movies and wrestling, both personally and professionally, at least one of those two is going to feel like too much. So I try to take my foot off the gas a little bit when it comes to having free time, because I never want to lose that aspect of being a fan. Well, when the Marvel shows were coming out, at least the earlier shows, I would wake up really early. I'd watch it once without my notepad, purely consume it as a fan. I'd let it sit for a couple hours, and then I'd go back and I'd watch it with my notes and dissect things and watch it with a critical eye and stuff like that. And that to me really helped because it helped balance being a fan while also being a reporter.
How did that watching it twice system also help you did it help you, should I say, pick up on details that maybe you missed the first time and make the reviews maybe more in depth?
Yeah, 100%. Because when you watch as a fan, you're strictly just trying to be entertained, right? You're not looking, and this applies to both movies and pro wrestling. You're not looking for the moves and relating stuff to the stories and all that. You're just looking to have a good time with what you're consuming. When you watch it with that critical eye, especially with Marvel stuff, it's huge because it's like the Easter eggs and the building to the big events and the different characters that could show up. And the same thing goes with wrestling. When you see, for example, the Jon Moxley CM Punk match from Dynamite and Punk tweaks his foot. And then when you're watching that with a critical eye, you're like, oh, okay, that's related to this. Is that, part of the storyline? Did he actually injure his foot? What does this mean for the future? It does impact your enjoyment a little bit. I will say I find when I watch pro wrestling, at least with the critical eye, I almost enjoy it a little bit more, which is funny when it's good wrestling. Obviously, bad wrestling is tough to enjoy whatsoever. But when you watch it with a critical eye and something big is happening, I'll never forget like Kenny Omega running out of Daly's place with the AEW world title. I was like, oh my God, something's happening here.
When Don Callis was like, we'll see you on Impact.
Right. That made my mind melt. Like that kind of stuff. And when I'm like thinking in my head, okay, what does this mean? Partnership with Impact, possible crossovers and all that.
Honestly, I thought he screwed up. I thought he said the wrong thing.
Well, the only reason why I didn't is because he was very persistent to say Tuesday, different time, different channel. And I was like, okay, something's being built here.
That's a good point, actually.
But, yeah, it was special. And just to circle back to your question, that critical eye versus fan, it's something that it's an art to master. It's something I'm still working on. But there have been certain instances where I have made that balance basically perfect.
What about moments where you haven't made it perfect and maybe a review has turned to, for lack of a better word, to fanboy, or watching something for leisure has turned to like critical and like a work brain? I hope that question made sense.
Sure. It's hard to think of a specific example, but both have definitely happened before. Fanboy with a review. I will say, anyone who follows me on socials knows how much I love The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which was a Marvel show that was on back in March of 2021. And I love that show with my whole heart. And I've gone back and watched certain episodes, and I still love them as much as I do. But part of me wonders if I go back and read some of my earlier reviews, if I was too fanboy-y with that kind of stuff, because I just love the characters, right? I love that specific world within the MCU. As for being too critical and maybe having kind of a negative lens on things just because the work brain kind of took over, there are certain times like wrestling, there's so much to consume, right? On a daily basis almost, that some genuinely great shows can just feel like work after a while. I love what AEW does, but some of their pay-per-views being 5+ hours long, it's hard to appreciate every single match. Even if every single match on the card is 5 stars, but there's 10 matches to consume, at least 1 or 2 of those is going to feel like work. So I can't think of a specific example, but I've definitely been drained by some lengthy wrestling shows.
Do you find like after you do something for work, say it be a film or it be a wrestling event, you have to take a couple of days off from watching them for leisure because the work brain automatically kicks in, or like you said, you're burned out?
Yes, and that's a really timely question because I just got back from New York Comic Con this past weekend, and that was nonstop content for about 3 straight days. I had a couple of interviews that were with shows that I wasn't following as closely as I was before I knew the interviews were coming up. So there was a lot of binging. I had to watch a lot of episodes of TV ahead of these interviews to prepare for them. And, it's so hectic in the moment, and, you're vibing off that adrenaline, and it's great in the moment, but there is a crash afterwards. It's the same thing as caffeine. Like when the work brain is moving and moving, eventually you're going to slow down and your body's going to catch up to you. And definitely today, time of recording, and the day before this, I have taken a step back from consuming content purely as a fan because I know I need to recharge my batteries. And my batteries were just especially drained this past weekend because of the once a year event that is Comic-Con. And so, yeah, we're taking it easy. But that being said, I still will be tuning in for time of recording Dynamite tomorrow, and probably watching it more as a fan than watching it with the critical eye.
As you work for a site, if you are in that stage where you're like trying to recharge and they reach out to you and be like, look, can you cover this? We know you've just done this, but we need someone to cover this. Do you ever have a moment where you're like, come on, man, really? Like, or do you ever have a moment, or do you just think, I'm so lucky to do what I do, that you're like, yeah, let's do this?
It's definitely the second. I feel very honored and grateful to do what I do for a career because I have a lot of friends who are in fields that they're just not passionate about, and they work for the weekend every single week. I like to remind myself that even when there are days where my batteries do feel low, that at the end of the day, none of this actually feels like work to me. There are very rare opportunities where it's a show that I maybe hadn't heard of, or it's a wrestling company where I need to kind of catch up on some of their storylines before watching their pay-per-view. Very rare moments where I feel like I have to do actual research beforehand. That's not to say I don't put research into my work. That's just to say a lot of my research is just kind of all backlogged because I've just been consuming this type of stuff for over a decade now. And I also, at this point in my life, I'm 22 years old. I just kind of have that say yes mentality of if something gets offered to me, it means I'm being trusted with that thing. And why would I ever, like disrespect that moment of trust to say like, oh, I'm too tired right now. If I'm too tired, someone else will step up, and then a spot that could have gone to me will get taken, and then I'll slowly fall down the ladder a little bit. And that's not necessarily saying that is a direct consequence of saying no to opportunities. But in my head, I'm always someone who's like, I should be grateful that I'm being reached out to and thought of to be trusted with this. I'm going to find that energy somewhere, and we'll find time later down the line to rest, because that time always does come eventually.
Well, has there ever been a moment, though, where you should have maybe rested and said no, and maybe a piece of content didn't turn out as well as you thought? Or if you've gone back and gone like, I could have made that better if I'd rested and maybe said, look, I'll do this in a couple of days, guys.
Yes, 100%. And I'll give you an example from my college days. And I hate saying that because it makes me feel old, saying my college days like they were so long ago.
You're only a year younger than me, but I do fully get what you're saying.
Right?
It's like, wow.
Yeah. Back in, I want to say it was like February 2020. It was right before the pandemic hit. At college, I worked for my campus TV station called Citrus TV. And we had a day where my mom and brother came to campus to visit, And it was special because they came on a Wednesday, which was in the middle of the week, but I insisted they come on a Wednesday because that's when I taped my entertainment show and I was hosting that week. So it meant a lot to me for my family to get to see me perform on air live in the studio. And we had a great show and I put a lot of prep into it because I knew people special in my life would be watching it. And everything was great. And I was just riding that high that after I dropped them back off at their hotel, I went back to the studio to pick up my belongings, and then the sports crew asked me if I would help run a crew position for them. And because I was just buzzing off that positive energy from the entertainment show, I was like, absolutely, let's do it. The sports show got delayed by an hour because the game went late. We didn't start production until 2 a.m. I didn't get back to my dorm until 3, and it just set off this kind of chain reaction of just like, I woke up tired, and then the show I was on the next day, I didn't perform as well because I was too tired. And then I retraced my steps and I was like, where did I lose all this energy? I had such a good show Wednesday. Oh, that's right. I overexhausted myself because I was riding such a high from that good show that I wanted to do more and more. And that example is what I'll always go back to, of like when I have a successful interview or I have a successful article or I go to a press screening and I'm loving it. I let that feeling simmer. And then I'm like, all right, now let's separate ourselves from that world. Make sure we don't exhaust ourselves too much. Because what happens is it just kind of throws off your week. It throws off your routine if you try to do too much too fast.
How much content, now that you're a bit older and maybe have a bit more experience, how much content can you now do in a day?
In terms of like what, like you're asking for like a number?
How do I say this? Like you mentioned there that you did what 2 shows and were exhausted, but how many can you do? If roughly many can you do and you're like maybe not burned out?
Sure. In a very busy day, I can do. I'm trying to think of my busiest day at Comic Book so far. I've done a day where like I've done 6 articles, like 3 TikToks, an interview, maybe 2 interviews. Yeah, I think that's like the busiest day in terms of like stretching myself across different mediums. Because my work is not all just written or all just audio or all just video. It's a little bit of everything. And I put a lot of pride into what I do. I really don't like mail in anything. All my articles, I make sure are perfect in terms of grammar and facts. And I always polish a very nice thumbnail for each of them. The TikTok videos, I don't just kind of jump cut record. I make sure they have visuals and they're edited well. My interviews, I always make sure I give ample research to my subject, because if they're gracing me with their time, I want to make sure that I actually put
100% agree with that. I 100%
Exactly.
agree with that.
Because you want to make sure that it's reflected to them that you care about this conversation. And so, yeah, so that would be a busy day. But I know that I would clock out that day and look back and be prideful of what I was able to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. You brought up there the amount of mediums you do work in, whether it be articles, TikTok, or interviews. Does having so many mediums to work with help you with not feeling burned out?
Yes. And here's another great example coming off of New York Comic Con. Yesterday in particular, the last thing I wanted to do was be on camera. I was so tired.
I'm so glad I didn't ask you to do this yesterday.
Well, hey, it did work out because you got me at a day where I was like, all right, we're gonna put a little bit more extra effort into, presenting myself today. That's just because I'm a big hair guy. I spend about 30 minutes on my hair every morning, and some days I'm just like, I don't want to do this right now. So the day after New York Comic Con, I was like, I am so happy to just write alone and not have to worry about presenting myself to be on camera. Other days, I'm like, I just feel good. I wake up motivated. I have a good tone of voice that day and all that. And I'm like, I want to be on camera. Like, I want to talk about this. I don't want to just put it into words. So being able to flip flop between the different mediums, it does definitely help. But there will come a day where I probably will want to centralize everything into just audio and video production.
You talked about there, and I want to go into hair products in a minute, but you did talk about there, like days that you love recording and stuff like that. But what about days that you have to record and you're like, I don't want to do this? What is your routine to like get into that headspace of recording and like to be in the zone to record?
Sure. An easy thing. If I know I have to record and I wake up that day feeling kind of just groggy, I force myself to shave. I'm someone my face. You can't tell now. I look like a baby face right now because I shaved today. But every single morning, I wake up with that 5 o'clock shadow, and if I don't have a clean shave, for whatever reason, it just makes me feel like I overslept or whatever. So having a clean shave immediately puts me in a mindset of like, okay, I feel refreshed today. We can get this done. Putting on a nice outfit too, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. If I'm wearing sweatpants all day, I'm going to feel like, I'm just kind of on my couch all day. If I make sure to put on a nice hoodie or put on a polo and some nice jeans or whatever, that kind of puts me in that mentality of like, even though as of right now, we're working from home, I'm still in that kind of, professional environment. And then, yeah, just getting it done at the end of the day. I don't really have crazy strict deadlines when it comes to posting TikToks. Usually just, get them done when I'm on the clock and all that. But if I keep putting it off and I wake up at 9 and I'm like, oh, I'll do it later. It's just weighing in the back of my head. So if I can just get them done immediately and really put some extra care into them, even if it takes a little bit longer to record because I'm not in that jazzed up mindset, it always helps to just be like, all right, well, it's done now. Let's go back. Let's see what we could have done better. And let's apply that to the next day.
You talked about earlier as well a story about wanting to record extra because you were so hyped up. So what I am curious to know is what do you do now if you are hyped up to bring yourself back down to, I always call it civilian life, which sounds weird. People know what I mean when I say that, right?
Yeah, well, back down to normalcy, a standard level of energy. What I do to calm the hype. Well, for me, it's easy to just kind of pour it all out when there's like a big new, like that whole locker room backstage situation with AEW. All I wanted to do every single day was talk about this because it got me fired up, right? It's a big wrestling story. I genuinely believe it's our generation's version of the Montreal Screwjob in terms of the impact it had.
I never thought about it like that, but that is a very good point.
Right? Like we're a month removed from this, and we're still feeling the effects, and we don't know what effect it'll have on the longevity of AEW.
Because at time of recording, we'll say this: nothing has been announced. The Bucks are still suspended. Punk is still status is still. You might know more than I do, Liam, but his status is still unknown as far as we know. Correct? And it's like everything at time of recording. It's like, what are they gonna do?
Exactly. And it's like when I read the updates on that, I don't want to just type it out. I want to convey that information and emphasize to people who maybe aren't pro wrestling fans, you guys should be paying attention to this story because there's a paradigm shift going on in the industry right now that could have ripple effects on it for years and years.
I see what you did there, by the way.
Yeah, right. I know. John Moxley, shout out. But yeah, things like that, the best way to bring myself back down is to record that TikTok or record that podcast and send it out, and then now feel like, okay, I pass that energy out into a different platform. I say the word energy a lot on this recording today, Tom, but that's really kind of how my vibe goes with my industry. It's just kind of a transfer of energy, trying to move my passion to the people that are consuming it, and hopefully spark discussion, all that kind of stuff. So the best way to bring myself down is to use that, surge of energy for some good.
That's really cool. You talked about being so young and stuff, and like, do you think, like, do you ever think like, oh, I got this job because I'm young and like I know the terminology? Or did you ever have this thought where it's like, I got this job because I'm young and maybe not off of my experience? Did you ever have like self-doubt like that?
What do you mean the second half of the question? Could you repeat that?
How do I phrase this without sounding horrible? Like,
No, hey, nothing you have said sounded horrible. I like when people tell it to me straight.
did you ever have the moment where it was like, I got this job because I might know about the social media more than some older people, rather than off your experience?
I see. You're saying like the generation divide, right?
Yeah, that
Like
sort of
like
thing. Yeah.
sure. I can confidently say no, because even though I have skills in areas that might be a little bit, different to older generations, it's no secret that TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, my group of peers is more privy to that than say, our parents and grandparents and stuff like that. I say this without any type of arrogance. I do feel like I have an expert level of intellect on the stuff I cover. Those three in particular being professional wrestling, Marvel, and Percy Jackson. I don't know if you're familiar with Percy Jackson, but
Not really.
it's a series of books that is being made into a Disney Plus show. It's going to come out in 2024, and I have covered that show's production so closely that like I can pull dates and castings and names of actors out of my head on a moment's notice, not because I'm studying it, but because I pay such close attention to it. I just kind of subconsciously have developed this like database of information in my mind, and I feel the same exact way about everything regarding Marvel and everything regarding professional wrestling. And I can confidently say that I feel like I'm at a level that is invaluable to any publication that employs me. And like I said, I don't say that arrogantly. I say that just being confident in my own skill set and what I can bring to the table, what I can use with my knowledge base and also my skill set in this modern age of digital media. Combining those two together, I think you only have a very select few amount of people that can do it as well as I can. And again, I say that without arrogance. I say that with just confidence in my abilities.
I totally get what you're saying. One thing I am curious to know, say we flash forward 20 years into the future, are you worried that, say, you will be our parents and are like, I don't understand this new technology. I can't do my job anymore. Have you had that thought at all?
Yes, very recently. I was scrolling through TikTok one day, shortly after I graduated. This is how it hit me so hard, and it hurt because I was like, oh my God, am I getting old? I was scrolling through TikTok, and some term got brought up. I forget which one it was specifically, but like, the Gen Z lingo, we say like, mid, lit, fire, whatever, all that stupid stuff. There was a term that got brought up that I had no idea what it meant. And I was like, oh God, am I now on the older side? Is this going to start a snowball effect of me just being out of touch? And so I don't put in significant extra effort to stay in touch, but it is always in the back of my mind to be up to date with things like the lingo, but also just what's trending and stuff like that. Because you never want to feel like, the old man yelling at cloud of like, this is how it used to be in my day. Like, I never want to feel that. I want to evolve with the times, not stay in the past. And fortunately, I am still young, so I still feel like I am ingrained with the current generation. But there will absolutely come a time where I will feel like I'm on the outside looking in, and I hope I'm on the outside looking in, admiring rather than, being all like, oh man, back in my day. Like, I never want to feel like that.
Do you have like a backup plan if it does come to the sort of back in my day era that you can no longer cover the things that you cover? Do you have like a backup plan where you're like, what you want to do if, say, you're not able to cover the things because you are that old man yelling at clouds, for lack of a better word?
No, and that's because to me, and it's different for other people, but to me, having a backup plan means you're not all in on the plan that you're currently working on. Because just naturally, if you're prepping for backup, it means you're not confident that the main thing is gonna work out. And I have invested too much time, effort, money, blood, sweat, and tears, all that stuff into my current career to ever pursue anything else. If one day, down the line, 10, 20, 30 years, I eventually become the retro voice per se, the voice that the older demographic
I
tunes
think there'd
into.
still be a place for you though. Like,
Exactly. Yeah, so be it. But at the same time, I will never, ever in my life stop covering movies and wrestling. This is my bread and butter. This is what I've done. This is what I've consumed since I was 11. This is what I have been a contributor of since I was, I want to say 19, 20, around that age. And this is what I love. No day goes by where I feel like this is work. And
mhm.
I feel like I have too much to offer this space to ever even think about leaving it. So no, we're in this for the long run.
What if though you did lose your fandom and start viewing either wrestling or movies, or maybe both, as work? Would you have to walk away, or would you just have to say to comic book, "Look, I need to take a week, 2 weeks maybe, to find my passion again"?
So that's also why I'm so focused on recharging the batteries, right? Like it's because that is in the back of my mind. I never want it to come to that. I try to recognize that when I have moments of loving a movie so much and being like buzzing when you leave the theater, to maybe send out that first tweet or make that first video and then let it simmer and then use that energy the next day, because you don't want to exhaust everything too much to the point where, like I said in that earlier story, you wake up late the next day and then domino effect, boom, 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 your whole week is thrown off. So I would be lying if I said that that wasn't a concern, but I do try to just quench any of those like slight indications of the bigger problem happening so short into their existence that it never does lead to that bigger problem. In the sense of like when you're exhausted from a weekend of travel, you don't have to wake up the very next day super early, 5 a.m., do the whole crazy morning routine. Wake up, have your easy day, only do articles that day, and then, put in that extra effort the next day if you're feeling it. You never want that to build up too much because, like you said, there could come a day where that passion feels like work. And we work every day to make sure that day never comes.
Mm-hmm. So I'll try to find the transition in what you were saying there. But believe it or not, we haven't covered. How did you join comicbook.com?
Sure. So Comic Book reached out to me around this time last year, when I was still in school, just about like where my head was at, what my plans were after school. And at the time, I was still with two different publications. I was with Wrestling Inc. and I was with The Direct. And I loved both of my positions there, but I was also contributing to them on a part-time basis because I was still in college. Studies were still the primary factor. And yeah, just to kind of, make a long story short and flash forward a bit, we had conversations every couple of months about how I would feel about joining the website, joining the team. And things just kind of made sense when graduation came around, to go all in. And so that's just kind of how it happened. I started with Comic Book at the end of June. I officially announced it around mid-July. And yeah, we've been doing this full time for about a little under 4 months now.
This might be a very stupid question, but are you exclusive to comicbook.com now?
Yes, I'm exclusive in terms of making content, but I am like I can guest on any and everything.
Things
But
like this, for example. Like,
exactly, yeah, you are not breaking any contracts by having me on your show.
oh no, that wasn't what I was saying. It was like, oh, because it would have transitioned into Wrestling Inc. questions or stuff like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was more like, so with being exclusive, what have you found since you were doing it part-time with your studies? What is a habit maybe you had to break that when you were doing this work part-time? And then what is a habit you've created since doing the work full-time?
Oh, great question. I guess a habit I've had to break. I wouldn't even say it's a habit per se, but like when I was in college, I was working when I felt like it, right? It was part-time. There was no expectancy of me to do anything any month per se. Like I was available when I was available. And it was very much understood that like Liam's in college right now. That's his primary focus. Anything he can do for us is appreciated. So I had a habit of, okay, well, I have free time here. I had free time there. oh, I want to take this weekend to visit a friend or have to myself, so I won't work then. With comic book, it's very much, a daily commitment, Monday through Friday of covering stuff. So that has been a habit to establish of being on a set schedule rather than just a sporadic, okay, wake up the morning, where can I fit, content into my day. Nowadays, it's just like, okay, my day is built around my content. So I guess that's a habit I've had to establish. And on top of that too, is just kind of a more set sleep schedule, because when you're on like a work schedule, you want to make sure you're energized and ready to go. So I rarely stay up past, 10:30, 11 p.m. Eastern on weekdays.
Do you remember, like, this is the funny thing, isn't it? As kids, we used to think, oh, love staying up that late. But now that we're doing it in this content game, it's quite funny, isn't it? It's like, going to bed at 10:30's lovely.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's crazy, because I remember thinking that midnight used to be late as a kid. And then in college, there were some days where I'd be like, okay, hopefully I'll be done with this paper by 3 a.m. and we might get a full REM cycle in for sleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, establishing a good sleep routine has really helped. And also on top of that, it just kind of, when you sleep well, you wake up semi-energized, you go to the gym, you have your morning coffee, whatever you do in the morning to get yourself fully awake, that just kind of sets off a very productive day. So that's something I've also tried to establish.
What about, you mentioned a habit you have to break, then what is like a habit that you don't want to get into now you're working full time?
Ooh, good question. Good question. Bad habits. Bad habits. I guess falling behind on responsibilities, right? In the sense of there's obviously stuff that's pressing. When news breaks, that's what's timely. If there's, random example, Tony Khan goes on Twitter Wednesday morning and announces the main event of Dynamite for later that night. That has to be, that news is only relevant for 12 hours, because as soon as that main event happens, all right, it's in the past. So that's something that's pressing immediately. Versus other stuff, when you do an interview and you have stuff embargoed, for example, I've spoken with actors and directors about a show coming up that I'm not allowed to publish that interview for like 2 more weeks.
Oh, right. I was just about to ask you what an embargo means.
Oh, yeah.
Now I get you.
Yeah, and as can be the situation with that, if you do that interview and you're like, oh, wait, this is great, I don't have to worry about writing it up for 2 weeks. You don't want to get into that habit of, now it's the night before, that interview has to run, and that night before just happens to be a crazy busy news day, and now you're inundated with all these things, and then you look back and go, oh, man, well, I had free time last week. I should have just done it then. I never want to get into that habit of getting behind on those kind of long-term evergreen projects, because they just kind of pile up, and there's nothing worse than not doing right by your interview subject. I've never felt that, but I always want to make sure that anyone I interview, when they read the article or watch the interview, they feel as proud of it as I do. And, to make sure that happens, you got to put in the effort to treat it with love and care.
You, with being so young, this might be a question you struggle to answer, but if someone is in college wanting to do what you do currently, or even in school wanting to do what you do currently, what is some advice that you have for people that want to work in your field?
Ooh, reach out to people. It is an easy one. It's so easy to get involved in this industry, right? Because a lot of people immediately think that if you're going to talk about movies, the only places are the Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Deadline, Pro Wrestling. The only places are, ESPN, BT Sport, Sports Illustrated, whatever, like the really big publications. But the reality is there are so many smaller places out there to where if you can get a byline, if you can get your name attached to an article and you can build up a log of content that you've done, you'll eventually catch the eyes of the bigger places. That's kind of what happened with me in comic book. The reason why I was noticed by them is because they had seen all my work previously. And when I was first reached out to by comic book, I had been contributing to this space for about a year and a half. Like, it didn't take that long. It just took consistency. That's the biggest thing, is like being able to to pump out new stuff, even if it's not on a daily basis when you start. Try to do one new thing a week. Which when you like scale back and look at your weekly schedule, it's really not that hard. Like it doesn't have to be. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be an article. Anyone can make a TikTok account. Anyone can make a YouTube account. Get on camera, start talking about something you're passionate about, and just never stop. The hardest thing to do is to start. From there, you just got to keep going. And eventually, I promise this to like anyone who does do it with consistency, you might not see an end in sight, but there are people watching you that have plans for you that aren't going to tell you their plans until you're ready to hear those plans. And that day will eventually come. So if you're watching this and you're looking for inspiration, get started, don't stop, and it will all work out in the end.
That's really cool advice, man. Before we do a quick segment and we wrap this up with a quick segment of generic questions, a question I love asking fellow interviewers when I have them on is, where can I improve? What did you enjoy? Where can I improve?
To you?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I love the personal questions. I love talking about like myself and stuff like that. And I say that in like, not like I love hyping myself up.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I like talking about my creative process, right? Rather than just like what I've done. I like talking about how I've done it. So those are great questions. I don't really know if I have any ways of suggesting how to improve. You have a really good flow of conversation. I feel like each question kind of like built upon the last one. So yeah, I don't really know if I have any blatant improvement suggestions. I think you have a really good flow here.
I really appreciate that, man. But before I start blushing, we're gonna wrap this up with a segment called Generic Questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before will know this, where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite pay-per-view, favorite tag team, favorite theme song, and favorite wrestling superstar. And we're gonna throw some movie ones in there for Liam as well, which is gonna be his favorite movie, his favorite franchise, and his favorite movie character. And I'm going to throw two more in there, which is basically what are his dream interviews for wrestling and for a movie. So what's your favorite wrestling match of all time, Liam?
Awesome. Favorite wrestling match of all time? I'm going to go with the one I have behind me here. AJ Styles, John Cena, SummerSlam 2016. This match, I felt the European pain, right? Because I was in Ireland when SummerSlam 2016 was going on.
Oof.
So I was watching this match at 2:30 in the morning local time, and it just meant so much to me because AJ Styles at the time was one of my favorite wrestlers. He was one of the few that I had watched before WWE. I saw his run in TNA. I saw what he was doing in New Japan, and then he comes to WWE. And despite making his name elsewhere, he was still treated like a big star, and he beat John Cena clean at SummerSlam. It was such a cool moment. I love that match, and I'll never forget how I felt.
Favorite pay-per-view of all time. This can also be, actually, it'll be favorite event of all time because it can be an event you're at live as well.
Sure. Favorite pay-per-view of all time. Recency bias a little bit, but AEW All Out 2021. What a show from top to bottom. CM Punk's return match, the debut of Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole, the Young Bucks and Lucha Bros had an incredible.
Oh, that was the cage match, wasn't it?
Yeah, that cage match was awesome. There were so many moments on All Out. I think Ruby Soho also debuted on that show and got a crazy reaction. That show, top to bottom.
Did you talk about Adam Cole? I don't mean that rudely.
Yeah, no, Adam Cole and Daniel Bryan's debut. Bryan Danielson's debut.
Yeah.
I that show I love from top to bottom, and my reactions to it are immortalized on YouTube because I did a reaction compilation. It's like 25 minutes on my YouTube channel. And sometimes I go back and watch it just for my own amusement to be like, man, that is like peak wrestling right there. Look at the joy on my face. I can't wait to have that feeling again. But favorite event that I've been at live, I think it would have to be recently Grand Slam 2021. That was seeing Kenny Omega versus Danielson live was, oh my God, insane. And that was just everything. And seeing CM Punk cut a promo live too. He was one of my favorite wrestlers growing up, and hearing him talk in the ring. And when I had bought those tickets, I had no idea that Punk and Danielson would be on that show. And lo and behold, they were. So it was pretty special.
Is that because this might sound like a stupid question. Is it because they hadn't debuted yet? Like when you bought the tickets?
Because why it was so special?
No, because why you didn't know if they'd be on the show? That might sound like a silly
Oh,
question.
yeah, no, I bought the tickets like 2 months before the show. It was before any of the rumors had even started that they would be
Ah,
AEW. Yeah. I wanted to go to that show regardless. And then next thing you know, two of the biggest names in wrestling history joined the company within that time frame. It was crazy.
as I say, like a AEW show is on my wrestling bucket list. Somehow I've got to get to America.
They're coming to the UK eventually. I don't know
Oh,
when. That's not a
when
scoop or anything, but they will definitely be in the
when
in the
they do, I will be there definitely.
Mhm.
So moving on. Favorite tag team of all time.
Tough question. I don't want to be like, lame and mainstream and generic, but like I love the Young Bucks, man. Like
This segment's called generic questions, man.
that's fair. So I'll be generic then. I love the Young Bucks. Their facial expressions, their promos, their gear, everything is just they do the little things so well. They're great at the high flying crazy moves, but they like AJ Styles once said in an interview, he was like, wrestling is easy, the moves are easy. It's the little things that make the difference. And the Young Bucks know how to take a match from just, oh, whatever, this is just another match to, oh, there's a story being told here. I thought they enhanced Omega versus Hangman so well by having Matt Jackson just give that little nod to Hangman. That little thing right there took it to the next level. So I'm gonna be lame and just say the Young Bucks.
And then favorite wrestler's theme of all time.
Theme of all time. Oh man. Oh, you're talking to a guy that has an entire playlist that he listens to every day. This is so tough.
Just give me some off of your playlist then.
Okay, right now, I love Battle Cry, Kenny Omega's AEW theme. I miss Will Ospreay's elevated theme so much. He hasn't used it since the United Empire started, but it was so good when he was using it. The Nexus theme I love. CM Punk's This Fire Burns, CM Punk's Ring of Honor theme, Cody Rhodes, who doesn't love Kingdom. So many. Sheamus, his old theme. It's a shame.
Lobster Head.
Lobster Head. Yeah, I love that theme. Unironically. Undisputed Era from NXT. Aleister Black from NXT. There are so many that I just love. I miss CFOs. When WWE got rid of
list
CFOs
on your YouTube channel, man. Like,
yeah, I really should. I miss
yeah. And then as we wrap this up, favorite superstar of all time or wrestler before we do some movie questions.
I'm gonna go with my current bias pick. All time is probably still AJ Styles because of, like I said, following him his entire career, or for the bulk of his career, the end of his TNA and New Japan. Someone I've followed for their entire career since they started is Will Ospreay. I love Will Ospreay. I am dying to have him on weekly American television, selfishly, because I miss watching when he was on Dynamite leading up to Forbidden Door, when he was doing those trios matches. That match with the Elite is so awesome. And I can't wait till he wins that IWGP heavyweight title. It's going to happen eventually. He already, he won it before, but he didn't really win it until he beats Okada.
His neck issue popped up after he won it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It was just terrible timing. It was in the middle of the pandemic. It's Jay White's year this year, but I think if things go well next year, maybe we finally get Ospreay versus Okada and Ospreay finally wins. I will cry. I will be a mess. He's my favorite. I love Will Ospreay.
You brought up there this year and next year. As I said to you, this is going to air in December. So who is your wrestler of 2022? And then who is your possible breakout wrestler for 2023?
Oh, man. Great question. Wrestler of the year this year, it's hard not to say Jon Moxley because of everything he's done with AEW, despite not until recently being pegged as the number one guy. He was asked to step up when other guys couldn't, and he's done that so well. So I'm going to go Jon Moxley for Wrestler of the Year this year. And then for Breakout Star of the Year of 23, I think Carmelo Hayes is going to have a great year. I think Carmelo Hayes is going to get called up to the main roster pretty soon. And I think a lot of people are going to pen him as a future world champion very, very soon.
And then just quickly, we'll do some quick fire movie questions. Favorite
Sure.
movie of all time?
The Departed. I'm a Boston guy. I love a crime movie. Leo, Matt Damon, Mark Wahlberg, all together. I can watch it 1,000 times and still buy into the twist.
Favorite franchise of all time?
I guess, I mean, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is so expansive, so it's hard to not say the MCU, but a pocket within the MCU, I love the Captain America trilogy.
And then just quickly, if you were to be in a film of your life, who would play you in that film?
Oh man. Sometimes people say I look like Chris Evans. I know he's older, but
I can see the young Chris Evans vibes.
sure. Yeah. So I get that way more often than you'd think. And so I guess maybe Chris Evans, but if we're gonna go young, man, someone who's I'm a tall lad. I'm like 6'4", so I guess we need a tall young actor. I don't know who's young, but yeah, I guess Chris Evans.
And then, as we look at wrapping this up, the question I end all my interviews on, Liam, is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general. We're sort of going to live forever in some sort of weird way. So, what is one piece of content from your good self that you want the good people to remember you by? And then, what is one that you're like, if you could forget that, I would appreciate it?
Oh man, I've said this so many times, but what a great question, because that's a very important thing to me, is legacy, is like wanting to do stuff with my career that does live forever, that people want to go back to.
That question came up as an accident the first time I did an interview, by the way.
Really? Well, it's a diamond in the rough for sure, because that's a really good question. Man, that's so tough, because one, I'd like to think that my timeless piece of content hasn't been created yet. Because you never want to get that perfect 10.0, because then you're complacent forever. But yeah, I guess I have a couple interviews that I'm really proud of. I spoke with the Loki season 1 director, Kate Herron, last summer. And I was very proud of just the research that went into that, and the answers she gave, and just the response to it on social media in general. So that's something I would definitely want to live forever. I recently spoke with Ethan Page, AEW wrestler, and he was another one who, again, I was just very proud of that conversation. So I guess I'd want that one to live forever too. But one I'd want to forget, easy answer. It happened very recently. I spoke with Jacob Batalon for an upcoming project he was working on, called Reginald the Vampire. And we only could get in a couple questions because of just the roundtable nature of the discussion. And in one of my questions, because I wanted to get his castmates from Spider-Man's perspective on what he was doing, I asked him, some of the differences of going from a supporting character to a lead. And then in the rambling of that question, I mentioned oh, did you ask Tom Holland for advice? And he gave a very nice response and a good detailed response. But in hindsight, I felt very upset with how I framed the question.
Yeah.
I was like, we're talking about him here. We don't need to bring up his old castmates and whatnot. That was a situation of me just kind of getting lost.
I think that's still a great question, though. I'll say that.
Thank you.
Going from supporting to lead is a really good question.
Yeah, it's when you go from the mid card to the main event, your responsibilities naturally change. But that was just kind of a lesson in hindsight of sometimes you don't need to do too much with the question. You can just ask a question flat out and not have to add on stuff to explain what you mean. Most of the time, people know what you mean. And I one day I'll get the chance to avenge that silly little add-on of bringing up something that didn't need to get brought up. But yeah, we'll let that one die in the internet archives.
Fair enough. As we wrap this up then, Liam, where can the good people find you and do your content?
Oh yeah, thank you so much for this, Tom. This was an absolute blast. You can find me on all socials at Liam T. Crowley, spelt like it sounds, and all my content is on comicbook.com. I got an author page up there. If you just search Liam Crowley, you'll find all my articles, and you'll find links to all my other video content and all that. So yeah, I'd really appreciate if you show some love on socials, because this is how I make my living. And after all, I want to make sure people are happy with what I'm producing. So if I can put a smile on your face, then I've made my day.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Trash. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talk Trash. Follow bodyslam.net with Cassidy Haynes for my show with Cassidy Haynes, the Wrestle Watch podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and on Twitter. And follow Wrestle Watch Pod on Twitter to help us pick the match that we're going to watch every week. And I will see you in the next one. A goodbye.